Thanks, Noel. Thanks a lot for your help with this. I also want to thank the panelists because I'm going to ask them to speak as honestly as they can about why they do what they do. What does faith have to do with it? And how does it carry forward their lives? And I thought I would also, for those who are not familiar with it, start by a very small introduction to what happens when you're first incarcerated. When you go, you end up at Dodge, which is the intake prison. And there you are given a religious preference form. And it asks you to indicate, are you Protestant, Catholic, Jewish, Mormon, Buddhist, whatever. And you can say none, you can say atheist. But once you sign that, that will restrict the kinds of programs you can attend. It's possible to change that, usually upon 6 months notice and with the chaplain's okay on it. But what it means is that the programs within the institutions are limited to people who are self-chosen. They've previously decided to do it. My personal experience has been that while that can be limiting in numbers, it is terrific in terms of the dedication of the people who are coming. It makes them very good groups. We don't often think about what life in prison is in relationship to any faith tradition you may have. Can you practice it? How do you practice it? What does it mean while you're there? Nor about the people who are working inside the system to try to offer some assistance in people's faith, and those who are trying to help them when they get out. I think, as we can perhaps imagine, it's often even more difficult when you return to society than it was in prison. But our first speaker tonight, I'm really pleased to have, is Sylvester Jackson. He's someone who has experienced both sides of the in and the out of it all. And Sylvester, I'll turn it over to you. You're on mute.
Thank you.
Okay.
You got to still remember that little old electrical thing, the digital. Thank you so much for having me here. My name is Sylvester Jackson. I'm the lead organizer of EXPO, which stands for Ex-incarcerated People Organizing. I'm the lead organizer of the Milwaukee Chapter. EXPO is a statewide organization with several chapters throughout the state of Wisconsin. My experience with the Department of Corrections started in 2009, where I was taken into Dodge County and began, my witnessing of the degradation and the tearing down and the putting individuals in position that can cause irreversible damage as well as death. And in fact, on several occasions while incarcerated, we witnessed several individuals that died on the unit where it could have been avoided had they was given the medical treatment that the staff was being paid to give. Also, when this individual that because he wasn't able to go out, he was a diabetic and was not given medical treatment, he ended up catching gangrene and had his toe removed. Just to say a few things, myself, after learning, the ins and outs of the laws that compelled us, to be under the servitude of the state, I began to challenge some of the things that they was doing that was definitely inhumane, and filed a couple of lawsuits and was, I was given victory over DLC on 2 occasions, which resulted in retaliation that wind up me spending at least about 6-7 months in segregation as punishment for challenging the authority of the Department of Correction. Later on in 2013, I filed what's called a John Doe petition as a result of several people's having heart attacks and death and the gangrene incident. I filed a John Doe petition asking the warden to be held accountable, him and his medical staff, for the injury that's being forced upon those who are in his custody. And it still remains today in the Racine County on the docket, but no one touched it. It's just being allowed to sit there because the system is not set up to challenge itself. So I witnessed a lot of hardship in there. To begin with, I came into the system under mental health. I was admitted in a mental health hospital at 2005. I was diagnosed with depression. I was diagnosed with anxiety, anti-personal disorder with suicidal and homicidal intention, and was put on psychotropic drugs. And the thing is, that's all was done, and it's the most case for people who have mental health in there. We're not giving the treatment to make us better or to become more independent as a person in the system, but more numb to keep us sedated, pretty much, from being able to be a threat, as they call it, to their staff and the others. But it's not something that they actually try to work and help people. Matter of fact, in Portage, we had 2 psychotherapists for the whole prison system. And it was designed, and to my understanding, still designed to keep people's from getting the treatment that they deserve or need, for that matter. Oh, I can keep going now. You want me to continue going on?
I have a question. I have a question for you, because
Yes,
we're
ma'am.
talking here about religious faith. So
Mhm.
where did your religious faith come into all of that? Were you
Well, I
able
was
to
born,
refine it or not?
no, I was born and raised under the Christianity banner.
Mhm.
I made a choice back in the 80s to walk away from faith and go into the streets and become a part of the dark side of life.
Mhm.
And upon making that decision, I just knew about God, but I didn't want nothing to do with God or religion. But it was during my my first and only prison sentencing where, I did get to that point where I opened up and I really had a long talk with God.
Mhm.
And that's when freedom came, in terms of I really understood that, I was incarcerated long before I got locked up, because the incarceration that did the most damage to me was the mental incarceration of the streets and the abuse that I suffered growing up, physical, mental, sexually. And those things had me bound long before I went to prison. But in prison is where I got my stronger connection with God based upon my relationship with him. And that's when I made a decision to trust him. And it's because of my faith. Even coming out of prison after 10 years, I was released with no support, no money, no housing, no family, no friends, no anything, but I had God. And I knew as long as I believed in God and he's able to do all that I need, I would be okay. And I got out in 2017, and I had obstacles put before me. I had a PO that was trying to lock me up, and in fact put me in custody 3 times before finally I got from underneath her. But at the same time, I was not going to allow no one else attitude to dictate where I go in life, and that the choice is mine to stay the course. And by doing so, I stand on my faith even today, and that means sometimes you have to just keep your eyes on God and not the things around you. And that's one of the things I really, work at, is acknowledging things around me without allowing it to take me away from what I'm focusing on. So it's my faith, in God, under, Christ and God itself, that keeps me grounded and rooted. And it reminds me, there's something greater than me that I have to answer to, because without that, I don't think I will be on this path, because you know, we can all find something that we don't think is wrong, but yet if scripture says it's wrong, then we have to make a choice to whether we're going to do what's right according to scriptures or do what's right according to ourselves. I chose scripture.
Good for you. That's terrific. Thank you very much. Our next, and we'll go from someone else to someone else who does indeed work inside all the time. And I'm going to call on Chaplain Lori Tenpenny, who is currently the chaplain at Racine Correctional Institution, and part of the time works also as a chaplain for the Richard E. Ellsworth Transitional Facility in Sturtevant. So Lori, if you tell us a little bit what it's like to be a chaplain in that setting. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much. First, thank you to the Interfaith Conference of Greater Milwaukee for the invitation to be with you this evening, and to Tonen, thank you as well for including me. I truly love being a chaplain in the Department of Corrections. I started out in ministry for over 25 years as a volunteer. So I know that side of it as well. And there definitely are advantages and disadvantages to being a volunteer as well as being a chaplain. How I got started was actually my mom was a chaplain, and she was involved with a prison ministry that would fall under the Protestant umbrella. And she used to talk about her experiences with the incarcerated, and would be so excited to go and even travel and sell family heirlooms for airfare to go to Texas death row and different places to meet with those who are incarcerated. And I didn't understand it. And honestly, at that time in my life, I was not practicing any faith. I was not interested in understanding it. I really just didn't want to know. Although it was puzzling to me how she could feel that connection. And then I attended a conference at a hotel that she was speaking at, and it was the very same type of conference that they did in prison facilities, and they were doing it in the community because people are people wherever you are and need some of the same services and encouragement and hope and those sort of things. And she invited me to hear her share. And I had a pretty radical encounter with God at that conference, and I surrendered my life to Christ and became a Christian. And I immediately wanted to know more about the prison ministry. So within 3 or 4 months from that conference, I was in Texas on death row and with the general population. And of course, I didn't have anything spiritually to provide them in care or as a volunteer, but they really ministered to me. They poured in so much to me personally as a volunteer. I felt like I received so much encouragement and inspiration and wisdom from them, and so much healing for my own personal situation and growth that came through the years of just spending time in that role, that I found it very, very rewarding. And I thought, but for the grace of God, go I. And I've seen through the years chaplains who really have a heart for the incarcerated, who really see them as people. And I've seen chaplains along the way who sadly see them more from the institutional perspective and don't see them as a person in need of rehabilitation and dignity and the ability to exercise and grow in their faith. And that is always probably the most challenging or saddest thing in my role as a chaplain, to see that, not just among chaplains, but among staff as well. There are many staff who truly do care and are invested and committed and make a difference every day. and there are definitely staff who have lost that ability or lost that aspect of their service. So I also want to say that what I'm saying, that I'm representing myself, Lori Tenpenny. I'm not representing the Department of Corrections. So just want to make that distinction clear. And also say that as a chaplain, there are many, many hats that we wear. We do a lot of administrative work, a lot of coordinating with volunteers, and providing the development or oversight of congregate religious programming. The incarcerated can practice their religion independently however many religious practices or different faith traditions they want to independently. But as Tonen stated, the designation for what umbrella group you are going to identify as your designated religious preference will determine what congregate events or activities you're able to participate in, as well as what type of religious property you can have, or potential accommodations for diet practices and those sort of things. So there are 8 umbrella groups, and certainly not every belief system falls under such a narrow designation, but so each one is very broad, and it can be a challenge for a chaplain, because first of all, you have to work within a pluralistic environment. Certainly be the keeper of sacred things is how I like to define it. And that means providing equitable resources and opportunities for all faith groups to practice. And that includes space limitations and donations, because honestly, most of the resources that are of literature or religious property for the different umbrella groups are donated. The state does not provide funds for that. So that can be a challenge, to have all the different umbrellas having resources for some of the smaller ones, where they are able to donate and make different resources available so that everyone has opportunity to receive. And it also includes just a lot of recruitment and training of volunteers, scheduling different programs that are being offered. We take proposals from volunteer groups and organizations, religious-based, faith-based organizations, on what they'd like to provide. And then, of course, their schedules with our schedules, and trying to manage all of that can be a challenge for sure. But we try to provide worship services and religious study groups for all the umbrella groups. And of course, spiritual care. There can be one-on-one pastoral visits that happen with community members. Also, spiritual counseling between chaplains and persons in our care, as well as grief services, and chaplains can also oversee and offer leadership of different umbrella group that their religious tradition is. So for example, I'm Protestant, so I could, if a volunteer is unable to make it and I needed to cover a Protestant service, I would be able to actually provide that service. Whereas a Catholic Mass, if we needed a priest here for the Catholic Mass, I wouldn't be able to do that. So I would be limited and have to provide something else, like possibly a daily Mass through video that's available, which is not the same thing, and can be a challenge for the persons in our care, because they want to practice and participate fully, and some of those things can be limiting, of course, because we don't have a full staff from every religious tradition to provide specific services. But we do have volunteers as much as possible and provide in that way. So again, we try to make everything as fair as possible and also integrate religious accommodations overall and work towards the goal, which the goal for Department of Corrections should be rehabilitation and treatment. And that's the perspective that we take in trying to assist and provide resources and programming that will help someone in that direction. I think oftentimes because one's faith and belief system is so deeply personal, they own that. They also have a right to it, and they've lost so many rights through their incarceration. There's been so much loss, and so religion and their practice of faith becomes incredibly personal, and they're passionate oftentimes about being able to give themselves to that and own it, really own it. And so much of religious practice is about identity, and in a lot of ways they have lost or have had that diminished in just the process and the situation of being incarcerated and how that unfolds in their lives. So it can be, of course, very restorative and bring them hope and really make a difference, because there's an intrinsic motivation for it, as opposed to Department of Correction programs that might be mandated for different things, anger management or domestic violence or sex offender groups or any of those type of programmings that are available through Department of Corrections, and they might be actually required to do those things. The religious practice is voluntary. They choose it. They're generally very engaged. They're not just going through the motions. Certainly there are some who do, but for the most part, I found that they really want to change. And I think faith and the personal, sincerely held beliefs help people to make the changes that they need. It provides them with strength and perspective. Oftentimes the incarcerated are reprioritizing their lives, evaluating things. And so faith usually kind of becomes a higher priority. And if they can focus on that and get the help they need through the community, it's also a connection for them with the community, because they're so separated from the community. So they love to see volunteers come in and have relationships, because even though I care for them and I'm available to them, they know that I'm receiving a paycheck from the Department of Corrections, so I have to be here. But someone who's willing to donate their time, it's very different, and they appreciate that so very much. And then also it's important for their reentry and their release planning and assistance with that, because they need community. And hopefully as they transfer that from the inside to the outside, if they have good bridges from the inside to the outside, they do extremely well. And I'm grateful to be a small part of that process for them, hopefully.
Thank you very much, Lori. I haven't actually seen you except on the screen, except many years ago when I was a volunteer at Kettle Moraine and you were there. So your work is appreciated. We go now to someone who is a volunteer. Stephen Spiro is the organizer or coordinator for a group of Buddhist teachers who are serving something like 15 institutions with programming. And Stephen himself goes into Columbia Correctional, Fox Lake Correctional, and Oshkosh Correctional to deliver programs. So I've asked him if he would talk a little bit about his experience. Stephen?
Yeah. Thank you, Tonen. Yeah, very glad to be here. Thank you all for your care, for showing up, for your curiosity. I'll just tell you a few vignettes. I've been going into prisons for over 8 years, and I've been into many. I'll just describe just one. For instance, at Oshkosh Correctional, we have a Buddhist group of about 25 residents and 6 volunteers from the community. And the interesting thing about it is that the community people come into the prison for their Sangha. Sangha means a group of practitioners. They come into the prison because they don't have an organization on the outside. So the name of that Oshkosh Sangha is the Gateless Gate. And we think of prisons as having bars and gates and so on. And as Sylvester so eloquently said, that can exist in your mind as well as out in reality. So we do services and we think of religious services. It also includes a lot of one-on-one pastoral visits. And these are really important. We get to know these men in a deep way, and we're always there for them. We do a ceremony, which we did a week ago, where practitioners have an opportunity to take vows and to formally commit themselves in the presence of witnesses, the presence of their peers, to formally commit themselves to a life of uprightness and practice. And the community, in exchange, vows to support them, knowing that we will fail again and again, and then we'll get up and start over, and we'll do our best to follow the precepts, which are fundamental to really all major religions, and to maintain a meditation practice as we move through life inside the prison and outside. And not only are they committing themselves to an awakened life, but me in particular and the volunteers in general are committing ourselves to support them. So there are a number of men who have been released, with whom I'm in contact, regular contact, in a sort of a professional mentor capacity. And what I say to them is, I'll be this for you always. I'll probably die before you, but that won't stop me. And we make these commitments, and we just maintain them and keep going. The spiritual path involves a lot of dead ends and cul-de-sacs and traps and difficulties, and it's really, really useful to have friends on the path, to have teachers and guides and mentors to help us when we get stuck. And that's why I go into prison, because I was living a very beautiful life, but I felt I was stuck. And one of the vows that Buddhists take is to do our best to perceive reality as it is, all of reality, and to not leave anything out. And the reality of those who are incarcerated, of course, it's the same as everyone else's, and at the same time, it's very different. So it involves a deeper level of witnessing and presence and understanding and compassion in order to be there. One of the things that we do regularly is we provide memorial services. And I know that we Buddhists are not the only ones doing this, but I'll just tell you a little story. At Columbia Correctional, we had about a dozen residents and a few volunteers. And the intention was to honor people who were close to us who have died. And we know that the loss of a loved one, a family, or a friend creates great grief. And the grief is in proportion to how much we love that person. And when men are locked up in prison, they're deprived of the opportunity to attend a funeral or a memorial service. They're deprived of the opportunity to give support to the family and to the friends of the deceased and to receive their support. And so for them, the person who dies goes unmourned. And this is a deep wound. So we regularly provide memorial services. And one of the things we do is we allow each man, we give them a piece of paper and we instruct them how to fold it. And they make it into a crane, a paper crane. And the instruction is to write the name of somebody who has died since the last service, in the last 6 months. Write the name on that little bird. And then we do a whole ceremony around that. And it doesn't have to just be one person. It can be many, or it can be an animal. It can be someone who died recently or long ago. And sitting to my right was this young man, 23 years old, from the inner city of Milwaukee. And he says, "Can I have another piece of paper?" And I looked at him and he said, I've written 25 names on this one and I've run out of space.
Mm.
And that is not unusual. And I've heard men say that they're sick of going to funerals and they don't even do it anymore. So we create a sacred space and we allow people to place into the center of the attention of all these others who are suffering. And it creates this tremendous sort of well of connection because everyone knows death. And they begin to see each other differently. They didn't know that that man who's sitting across from them just lost his mother because he hasn't told anybody that. Now, they don't know that the guy sitting on the right had 2 cousins who were gunned down in a drive-by. And they perceive this, they see that we're all in this together. And it creates this empathy, this compassion, and this sense that we're part of something much greater that we can't change, but that we can support each other in moving through. So this is one of the ceremonies that we do regularly at all the prisons. And then we encourage people when we have the one-on-one visits. Well, what's up with you? Why? How come you didn't come? Well, I didn't come because I got too much bad news. There's too much. And we say, that's why you need to come. That's why we need you to come. Maybe all you have to bring is your pain and your grief, and that's a lot to bring to this group. These groups are difficult at first because prison is a place where it's difficult to trust other people. It's risky. You don't want to come in and reveal too much about yourself. You don't know who's listening or how they could use that against you. And so just this gradual opening up and recognizing that we can trust each other at least a little bit and recognize the humanity in all the people, it makes a difference. people then learn ways to manage these deep feelings that they have had, and that are the result, as Sylvester said, of all the trauma that they experienced before they came. So just in conclusion, let me just say that I don't really know. People say, well, what good does it do? I don't really know. In Buddhism, we have the concept of planting seeds. So we plant seeds, and maybe they don't grow and flower immediately. It may take time, but there's a growing sense of connection, and that in itself is valuable. So thank you all for listening, for your curiosity, for your presence. And I'll go ahead and mute myself now and hear other people.
All right, thank you very much, Stephen. I'm looking forward to coming to Oshkosh next month. Now I'm going to introduce Will Perry, who is the executive director of the Dawah Center here in Milwaukee. And they have a very strong program in support of those who come out of prison and who frankly face astonishing complexity, astonishing animosity, a sudden lack of time, and enormous confusion. And I'm hoping that Will be able to talk a bit about their work in that respect. Will? Are you there?
In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, I bear witness there's none worthy of worship but Allah alone. And I bear witness that Muhammad is the last slave servant and messenger of Allah. I want to first thank the Interfaith Conference for giving me the opportunity to be of service again. And certainly I, with all humility, appreciate the idea of being considered to be on this panel. So I want to first of all thank you. I want to also thank those brothers and sisters that worship with me and have worshiped with me for the last 20 years, being of service and being of guides to me, as I'm not one who's directly impacted by incarceration, but over the last 20 years or so, I've met some amazing people throughout my stint in being of service to those persons who incarcerated and previously incarcerated. I want to thank them for their strength and their guidance in helping me to navigate through those obstacles, both inside and outside, and helping me to be a better servant to them and their families. I greatly appreciate that in them, and I pray for success for them and their families in this life and the next. I also would like to thank those individuals who, like Brother Jackson and Sister Lori and their brother Stephen, particularly Brother Jackson. Brother Jackson, you may recognize this. We've got Wisdom, and we've got
Yes.
and we've got Brother David Liners and Joe Elwinger, Reverend Joe Elwinger, and those folks there have been a real force to be reckoned with over the years, even longer than I've been around. And I've been around maybe about 20 years in this type of service. But those folks are even a lot older than I am. 65 years old in the next couple of weeks, God willing. And those folks are older than I am and got more energy and more determination than I do. I get a call from Joe and the sisters over there and say, hey, Brother Will, we're going to march on Madison, or we're going down to the Phillips Cheney Center. Can you join us on this march? And they're already out there by the time they call me. So I want to thank those folks, and particularly those folks who are not directly impacted by this incarceration. Those of you particularly who are not people of color, who are not African-American men in particular, who have suffered through and dealt with, institutional racism, and we deal with that on a regular basis. So you are the minority, and you are people to be appreciated for those of you who participate in this effort in helping individuals who you don't have to help, whether you get a paycheck or not, whether you're impacted or not impacted by this particular stressor, this PTSD that many of our brothers and sisters are suffering from as a result of the incarceration. I want to thank you again for your effort and your work. And we really pray for you and your families as well, that you reach success in this life and the next for you as well. So on a personal note, as a sister was asking in regards to, my involvement or the Dawah Center's involvement with reentry and incarceration, it goes back to our birth. Now, the matter of fact of just being an African-American male in the United States of America, you've got an issue with incarceration and systemic racism, at birth. So it starts at the very beginning of our life. And it starts with the institutions that are set up to oppress us, set up to not to have us to be successful, and our families and so on. So it has been an ongoing struggle for us from day one. But again, with folks like Micah, with the Interfaith Conference, and the folks who are not directly impacted by this system, to be able to go into these institutions, to take their time and their efforts to be involved in something like this, it deserves to be commended. And I just want to make sure that I give that respect that's due to those folks who helped. In regards to me personally, I'm the oldest of all my children. So for me, it begins at my service as being the older son, my service to my parents, service to my siblings, then going to the United States Marine Corps back in 1976 to 1982, where I was honorably discharged as a sergeant in the United States Marine Corps Reserve Unit, the Fox Company down here on Lincoln Memorial Drive. Then in 1979, I joined the Milwaukee Fire Department. And from 1979 to 2006, I served there, serving the community in that capacity. So it's been for me an ongoing effort in being of service to the community. And I had no idea where this service would lead me to. So here I am with the Milwaukee Islamic Dawah Center, 5135 North Teutonia Avenue. I was asked by Brother Isa and Brother Dr. Pruitt and Brother Ayub, may Allah have mercy on him, to take on the reins of being the director of this masjid. And so about 22 years ago, I was asked to be a volunteer, and I'm still on board after about over 20 years, something years, I'm still here. So now I'm thankful for that journey. The idea of attending and going to the various institutions, from RCI to HOC, to RIAC and Waupun, Fox Lake, MSDF, and at one time Techita over with the Imam Yassin. So the folks that I've run into over the years has been a wonderful learning experience and an opportunity for me to be of service to that particular community, that particular sector of our community. And as I show this picture, this is the reality of most individuals that are in these institutions. You talk about PTSD, you talk about oppression, you talk about anxiety and stresses, and all those physical and emotional and psychological abuses that take place. Most folks like yourselves that are on this panel and in listening to this service and in this event don't want to have anything to do with these folks. They could care less. They're looked at as being less than human beings anyway. So why not lock them up? So they don't deserve the services. They don't deserve the support. They have no families. They have no support. They have no reason to receive any type of help or support whatsoever. However, from a monetary and a policy standpoint and a taxpayer standpoint, individuals cost the taxpayers, individual adults, as far as I know, I'm maybe a little behind on the numbers, cost the taxpayers $30,000 to $40,000 per year to house these individuals like that in a cage. $40,000 a year to house this individual. Not to mention our children. Now, our children, locking up our children, it costs the taxpayers about $100,000 a year to house our children in incarceration. So you tell me, what's the best investment? Incarcerating a person under a system that's determined and set up to fail us, or invest in education, housing, mental health, rehabilitation, and all those other things that seem to be more important for other folks, but not to the folks here. So $100,000 can send a kid through college. maybe once or twice. UWM can get them through UWM for $100,000. Investing that type of money in those individuals who have already paid their dues. They've served their time. And I've got brothers around here that have been incarcerated behind walls of these institutions, anywhere from a few years to 50 years. We have individuals here who've been spent most of their time incarcerated. Now, we're not going to go into the details as to why they went through that and why they were incarcerated, because we know 50 years ago and 30 years ago, the criminal justice system are nothing like they are right now. They're at least a little bit more fair right now than they used to be. So those individuals who come to the Dawah Center here that I come in contact with, that have been locked up for over 50 years, some 30 years and 20 years, they've got a story to tell. And they are a valuable resource to this community. So I welcome them back with open arms. I spend a lot of time with them before they come home, but many of them just walk through the door and say, I just got out, I need a place to stay. So we have a place called the Ibrahim House. The Ibrahim House is a place of refuge and a place of security for men who are coming home after being incarcerated. Unfortunately, many of them cannot even leave the institutions unless they have a designated place of residence. And we help to provide that service, along with other services and resources, everything from getting a driver's license to getting a pair of shoes, to getting some clean underwear, to getting some clothes, to getting back on track with their credit, to welcoming them to the community, back to the community after being gone for so long, to reuniting with their families, to going over resumes, to setting goals, to having ideas as to what their potential may be now that they're home, because this can be a real shock for folks who've been incarcerated for so long to be out here in the world, so to speak, and never seen a cell phone, barely seen a computer, have no idea what it is to write a resume, to apply for credit, if you have an opportunity to do that. Apply for a job, fill out a job application, put together a resume, be back and re-engage with your families, reestablish yourself and your role in the community, find out what is that supposed to be? What does that look like? When perhaps before they didn't have that. They weren't so involved with the community in a positive standpoint. Many of them found religion and found faith during incarceration. So they've had a whole nother turn of events that have taken place that helps them to refocus their lives on a spiritual matter. Statistics have shown that those individuals who get involved and are participating in spiritual matters, events and programming and so on, they do exceptionally better than those who don't. So we have a job ahead of us. We have a responsibility. Religious folks, religious leaders, those with chaplains and those outside who help individuals with their spiritual matters, is just not simply confined just to that. It's the whole package: social, mental, physical, psychological, and spiritual. The whole ball of wax is entailed and encompassing rehabilitation and helping to bring these folks back to the community. So again, I want to thank Micah for helping to be of service here and helping me be of service. I want to thank again those folks and those brothers and sisters who I've come in contact with over the last 20 years or so. Thank them for their guidance and their service as well to helping me do a better job for them and their families. As a Muslim who happens to be African American, this is my duty to invite those individuals who I come in contact with what's good and to help to prevent myself and them from going towards something that's evil or that's bad or that's destructive. Something that's legislated by the Creator is what we strive for, and we strive to stay away from that which is not legislated by Allah and shown by His prophets and messengers. I have, I think that's about it. It's like about 5 minutes to 8 right now, so we're going to open up for some questions, or I hope if anybody have any questions or anything for me. I think that concludes my my statement. Thank you very much for the.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate what you all have said. I'm going to ask now maybe a couple of questions. They may be on target, they may not be, but for anyone on the panel, because I've been curious in all of this, what your largest personal challenge may have been, and whether or not your personal faith helped with that. What's the roughest thing you feel you've ever encountered within this situation? And is anybody willing to take that on?
You know, if nobody jumps on it, I'll jump on that right away.
Okay, Sylvester.
Okay, Sylvester's
No.
on.
Go ahead, brother.
Okay,
I come
okay,
behind you.
okay. Thank you for leading from that, Brother Sylvester. The biggest disappointment and challenge for me is that realizing that the individuals that are coming home are human beings just like we are.
Yeah.
You have expectations that perhaps may be more than what they can feel. It may be unrealistic for me to think that a guy can come from being locked up after 15, 20, 30 years and being able to hit the ground running, being able to get things on board and catch on and be able to move around as many of us have been able to move around, you know, all of our lives. So for me, it's been a difficult thing for me to say, okay, I'm giving this individual everything I've got, and they still don't make it, whether they choose not to, or it's because they don't have the capacity to do. So we've got to understand there may be some limitations and there may be some disappointments for us trying to be of service, and it's a two-way street. Those individuals have to be involved in their growth and their development and their success just as much, and not more so than I do. So it's been a difficult challenge for me in that I'm working harder than you are. I've had a problem with that, and that's been difficult for me. That I'm working harder for your success than you are, and that's been a real issue for me, a challenge for me. And that if I don't get that reciprocal kind of agreement, that's something I've been finding to be difficult. But again, the brothers have helped me through that and helped me work and navigate through that, because not everybody respond to my style and my approach. So that's why I've got other brothers around me to help to navigate and assign maybe one brother to another gentleman, another brother, to help them through the process, because maybe when my delivery is not working, maybe my approach doesn't work. So I understand, no, I have some limitations, and my expectations sometimes may be a little bit too high. So I may get a little bit disappointed when a guy fails, whether that be because he didn't get it or because he chooses not to get it. Now, we've got over 2,500 individuals that, at least the last time I looked at the numbers, over 2,500 individuals who have chosen to be, at that Dodge, chosen to be Muslim as their religious preference. Now, out of that 2,500, I may only see a handful. I may only see maybe 50. So where are the other 225, 2,225 individuals, where are they? I don't see them. So that the masjid is here. When they get out, they have the choice, they have the freedom to come here, or they don't. So that's been a frustrating thing for me, if that answers your question.
That's a very good answer. Thank you a lot. Sylvester?
Well, personally, the biggest struggle I had, as I said, is when you're placed in a system that is doing everything except what they're paid to do, which is, when you go to prison, you don't go to be punished by those working in the prison system. You actually go there because it's punishment by the court, for the crimes you committed. And yet in the system, there are individuals who work in DOC that is not even capable of adequately babysitting animals, not to mention human beings. You have people that come into the prison system under the guise of a guard, but they have an ulterior motive to harass minority Blacks, using the degradation terminology and insults against you, which has nothing to do with the judge sentencing you. And then to be antagonized. For example, I had a guard that was so bad at what he was doing that he was physically assaulting me, even though I was trying to avoid the conflict. He was so intent on causing a reaction from me, which he ended up getting. But just the pure thought that he can assault someone and have no consequences is part of the things that makes the system what it is, which is insufficient. Because when you go into the system, there is not a great effort to correct, no problem. You're not in there to be taught. 10 years I was incarcerated. There was no program that was given to me to make me better, you know, to prepare me for coming out. I was not allowed to get down the minimum where I can work and make money. So when I come out, I have a better chance, which goes back to what we're fighting for right now with the Cheney Center. If the Cheney Center had been within my path, I could have benefited tremendously from it. But instead, I was released after 10 years back into Milwaukee with no way to support myself. During cold weather, no resources and everything like that. So they deliberately wanted me to fail. But my faith in God is what kept me strong, because I had to remind myself that I come from the street justice. I come from Chicago. I went up the gang levels to being one of the leaders of one of the gangs. And, you know, I just practiced a lot of evil. And then to have the opportunity to get the chance to do right by yourself and others, I felt that was an opportunity that I would not let anyone deny me. So when I got out, I depended on my faith for strength, because I knew I had an obstacle in front of me. But as I come out and start going into things to learn things, you know, there's always a roadblock there. And it's coming from the people who's supposed to be here to help you transition. The POs, they don't. Most POs does not try to help you reintegrate. I had a PO that refused to give me a bus ticket to get home with, knowing that I was homeless and I had to get back to where I can lay my head. She refused to give me a bus ticket and told me, "Nah, that ain't our problem, that's yours." She lied like they didn't have housing for me, which I didn't know nothing about TLP housing, which is temporary placement, living placement. So she deliberately lied and said that they don't have that. And another person informed me that they do. And when I approached her on it, she reluctantly got me put in TLP to get me off the street. So these are the things that I faced when I got out of prison. But I did not waver on my faith. It was my faith in Christ that I knew if I just hold on, everything is going to work itself out. And I learned one thing: God put people in the place to help you on your journey, so long as you believe and keep your faith, keep your eyes on righteousness, and not fall prey to your physical or your mental desire to strike back out at people physically. That was my greatest struggle, because I was so used to physically reacting, but not spiritually responding. And then when I got a hold of that, that kept me, in spite of everything else. My faith in God, my belief that Christ is bigger than any problem, kept me, and still to the day keep me rooted and humble. And that's why today I do everything I can, because even during COVID, even, you know, I caught COVID and I was definitely facing death. But the minute God raised me back off that sick bed, I was back in his office, because I cannot imagine anyone coming from prison in the condition that I was put out here in, and they knock on this door and no one's here to open it and offer them some form of help. So that keeps me going.
Great. Thank you very much, Sylvester. And either Lori or Stephen, do you have anything in response to that? The most difficult thing you faced?
I'm happy to jump in.
Yeah.
It's always so encouraging and rewarding to see someone grow spiritually in whatever their faith tradition is through their incarceration. And then as they look towards transitioning and being set up for success, just really lacking. And as a chaplain, I try to find avenues to help them be continue to be rooted and grounded in their faith practices in the community, and to find connections and the support that's needed in the community can be so challenging, because there's so many stigmas, so many obstacles. You know, there are rules through probation officer, you know, all of those things. And faith is so important. I think it's critical to one's success in that transition from inside to outside. And there's a fraternization policy in place through the Department of Corrections that makes it very challenging, difficult to continue care as a volunteer or a chaplain from inside to release in the community. So there are security reasons for that. And I always recommend that volunteers have an inside team and an outside team so that they can transition those they're working with better and still be within the guidelines of Department of Corrections with the fraternization. But it still is challenging. And like was said earlier, I think by Stephen, that building relationships is so critical to someone really developing in their faith and as a person and growing and making changes and being transformative in their life. And so not having strong relationships in the faith community on the outside has, I think, really been painful to see someone make so many great strides and be doing so well in their faith in this incredibly difficult environment. And yet when they go to release, not having what they need to continue in that path is difficult. And then of course, trying to maintain a safe place as a chapel, a safe place for them to come within the institution so that they can feel and sense the freedom that they have in their faith tradition, their practices that just fosters growth and healing. Because as was shared, you know, there's so much trauma and so many hurts that have been suffered and losses and grief. And so it really needs to be a safe place for them to be able to grow and find what they need.
Thank you very much, Lori. Stephen,
Excuse,
anything?
excuse me, I was at, Lori, are you at RCI?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, thank you for your work over there. We used to spend a lot of time there with Chaplain Nuruddin.
Thank
Yes.
you very much. Appreciate your service as well.
He's our religious leader here at the Dawah Center, so we still have some connections. I appreciate your work and help over there.
Thank you.
I also worked a lot with Chaplain Nurdine, so if you see him, please give him my greetings.
Yeah, he's outside the door right here, so I'll make sure I do
Say hello from Tonen.
that.
He was very good to me when I was going there.
Thank you.
Stephen, anything at all?
Sure. I would say it's just being willing to have your heart shattered again and again and again. A broken heart is an open heart, is what my teacher taught me. And remembering many years ago going and meeting with a young man at Columbia, the Maximum Security, and I had a one-on-one with him that lasted an hour and a half. And at the end of that time, I felt so deeply connected to this young man from the inner city who had a long sentence to serve and had been in a long time already, went in when he was 17. And at the end of this, this encounter, this conversation that we had, this deep connection, it was time to go. So, I got up from the, table and the guard came and he was shackled. His wrists were shackled and they were connected to a belt around his waist, and his ankles were shackled, and the wrists were hooked onto the table. And the guard came and, unhooked him from the table and slowly started leading him away that way down the hall. And I'm going the other way, and I just stopped and watched him. And he turned and looked at me. And why is he going there and I'm going here? He's just as intelligent as I am, if not more. He's just as talented. He's a beautiful person. He's going down that dark hall and I'm going outside into the light. And how can I be with that? How can I be with that? That was one of the hardest things.
That's among the toughest you can possibly imagine. Thank you, all of you. I'm going to now just make a little statement. And
Excuse me, before you do, Trevor, I got somebody on the screen here for you. Sheikh Zachariah is here. Zachariah Nurdin is here.
Hello, my
really?
sister.
Oh my gosh, hi.
Hi.
Oh, hello. Oh, I'm so glad to see you.
I'm very glad to see you.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
This
How's
worked the
business?
whole evening just to say hello to you.
Yeah, hello to you too. How's business?
We're okay. We're all right. We're all right.
You.
Yeah.
Nice talking with you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much. Oh, what a great, that's wonderful. I adore Nurdin. What I wanted to do now, and after this, we're going to go, JC, to the questions from the chat, so that those who are attending and have something. We still have about 20 minutes in our time. I wanted to make as ferocious a statement as I can, because, you know, if you're watching this, you may be wondering, well, this is all very well. I'm not going into the prisons. I'm not incarcerated. What can I do about all this? Well, we talk a lot about our faith. What you can do is welcome people to your congregations when they get out. I have found in numerous occasions that all the good people who go to church or synagogue or mosque or Buddhist center every day basically say, not in my backyard. I don't want them in here because they've served time. And I have to tell you that the most important thing you can do to people who have lived and grown and changed and are out now is open your doors and your arms wide. It's very, very important, because if we have faith, we have to trust in their faith. And sure, we'll be disappointed sometimes. I had a wonderful man who used to come to the Zen Center every time he was not in prison. He was sort of a chronic, low-level offender, and he was in and out of prison. And every time he came back, and then I visited him in the hospital. And then he died, and I went to his funeral, and his son, who had been at Green Bay Correctional, they brought him down from there, under guard for the funeral. It was quite extraordinary. But that man was as much a part of my Sangha, both in prison, where I had first met him, and out of prison. We are all people, and I have to say to you, really be open. And if there are people working to change the system for the better, help them. Help them. It's called corrections, but it's not at the moment, or only very slightly, and sometimes only in the chapel, about rehabilitation. But certainly remember that every one of these people is a person. You'll be surprised how many members of your congregation have sons, daughters, cousins, friends in prison. It touches us all. So that's all I'm going to say. That's my soapbox, but I feel very passionately about it. You must not turn away from people. You must welcome them back. They've been through a great deal. Some have not changed and are going to go back. But those who have changed have grown in ways beyond our own imagining, been through things that we can't imagine. So please help them. Don't suggest. I remember once at the Zen Center, we were cleaning up after a morning meal, and one of our favorite members of the group was washing dishes. And something came up about, I think I was going to Japan, and someone said, and I mentioned that someone that I'd been working with in prison kept saying, well, maybe, sometime when he got out, he'd like to go to Japan. And one of our members said, well, can a felon go over, get a visa, get like a passport? And the favorite member of our group looked up from the dishwater and he said, sure they can. I'm a felon and I have one. And there was a big silence at that point. All right, JC, what have you got by interesting questions from?
Well, I have some questions too, and I just emphasize what you said too. When I was pastor in Durant, Oklahoma, someone who just came out of prison asked for a heater from me, and I gave it to him. And one of my parishioners said, "Well, you'll never see that again." And I said, "My tolerance are to be warm, period."
Yeah.
And he's a tolerant just like you. And then he ended up being very much part of it. But it's just taking that stance and being strong about it, which sort of answered the last question, what can we do? But we can get back to that too. But our committee chair did ask a question for the chaplain, and for any too, though, is how do you advocate for inmates when you see or hear about types of abuses such as what was mentioned by Sylvester? Or can you?
Yes, so I can definitely be available for support. And also where there are abuses or things that need to be addressed from a disciplinary perspective, there are definitely avenues in place to address those things, and staff are held accountable. There, I see people walked out, staff being walked out on a regular basis for misconduct. So it is, there is definitely a standard. There are work rules. There are things in place to help with that. But certainly there are things that happen, and that's why I think it's important for the chaplains and chaplaincy department, as well as volunteers, to also try to work with and support staff, because they are people who are also under a lot of stress and in this environment for years, and it's difficult. And so a lot of that even gets carried home with them to their families. Currently, there's a staffing shortage, and staff are working 16-hour days, 3 and 4 times a week. There are staff who are volunteering, non-uniform staff are volunteering to put on uniforms as to try to fill in for security, to add extra assistance. Also, there's different areas that are sometimes not available for operation because of staffing shortages throughout Department of Corrections. I know that it's not something that's unique to corrections right now, because in the community, most every industry or type of area of service or labor is suffering with filling their vacancies as well. So trying to do some things to recruit and to screen and to hire good, healthy people, and provide good training and help for those who are here and have their own issues, so that they don't carry those into their work. But it is, definitely challenging times right now. And there is recruitment for chaplains. It's ongoing. It is on wisc.jobs website. And go there and look at that. There's also lots of other job openings. If you have friends, family, please spread the word, encourage them. If someone is looking for employment, we need good staff. It makes a difference. And also volunteers that are willing to connect with staff and lead them in spiritual depth, as well as those in our care. So I hope that.
Oh, no, as having been a hospital chaplain, you have to work with not only those patients, but also the staff themselves. And you did lead us into another question, is how can, and maybe other panelists can help answer, is where there's other opportunities to volunteer. And obviously there's always a need for chaplains as well.
Correct. Yes, so to volunteer, there is a process in place. You would, excuse me, contact the facility that you would like to volunteer at. Talk to a volunteer advisor or volunteer coordinator. There's an application that needs to be completed, and then a process of background checks and some volunteer orientation, and then fingerprinting, and then you'll be able to be a volunteer with Department of Corrections. And we have facilities all over the state. And if you go through that process, that would also give you permission to be an approved volunteer, not just at the facility that you might start at, but at other facilities as well.
Okay.
The question maybe to the other panelists too is where areas should probably others volunteer through your groups? And also, and just to add to that too, the question that Tonen started answering, what can we do, especially for those who are on the outside?
What, if I could, a lot of times organizations like EXPO, community organizations that work around reentry, welcome volunteers to, become a part of the organization. And it's more easier for those who can get involved that do not have a record, to get in the system to help from within than those of us who have records and been on paper to get in. And that's why I try to encourage those who have not had record, which we call those who are not directly impacted, to get involved because they have a role that they can play as well. You don't have to be incarcerated or have a history of incarceration to help those who have been incarcerated, because there's room and space in this area where you can be a part of changing of somebody, the change of someone's life simply by volunteering with an organization, going in and being the voice of the organization to help those in there be better mentally, physically, and spiritually prepared when they come back out into the community. So that's one way of getting involved. Just join and volunteering with organizations like EXPO and others in the community to help them get in there and get their message and their service across so when people come home.
Another way is, that's real precious to us and is a financial support. I mean, these folks coming home, many of them don't have a pair of shoes other than what they're wearing out here, and some of them don't come home with those. So they need everything sometimes from shoes to clothing to bus passes, to help with the deposit if they need to find a place to stay if it's not a TLP. They need the coats and gloves and all that stuff, and to just some basic needs, some basic, hygiene materials and so on. Some guys, they need a sleeping bag and some basic stuff, toothbrush and toothpaste. They may come home with absolutely nothing. So, send some financial support to these agencies that are here, the EXPOs and so on, your local religious group or whatever. Send them some money and designate that money to reentry, for those who are previously incarcerated. So when they come to your church or to your mosque or to your synagogue or to your religious organization, you'll have a pool of money there to help them, help them started, because they can use a couple of dollars to get them going, a meal or whatever, but it takes money to move a lot of that stuff. So, we're all volunteer organizations who live on donations. So we all need financial support to keep doing this work as well. So that's not a small thing. It shouldn't be neglected.
Yes.
Let me just step in for 1 second to suggest that in addition to Will Perry's organization, there is Project Return, which is again religiously based, and its whole job is to help people return. You might go onto your website and take a look around what's being done here in your own community in terms of those coming out, because there are several organizations that could use your support, financial and otherwise. JC? Next.
I'm sorry, as you mentioned, Project Return is a good organization. We've worked very closely with them. I've sent a number of our members here when we couldn't help them. We sent directly to the folks down at Project Return, and those, is that Dennis down there? Is that Project Return? Is that Dennis? But the folks down there, they've done an exceptional job with helping the folks that we've seen and asked for help as well. So we work together, not just in silos. We work together in some collaboratives on stuff, all the time. So our doors are open to one another, and not only just to the folks we serve, but those of us who are serving those folks need to make sure we maintain a sense of open communication with one another.
Okay, JC, got another question?
Well, I do want to remind you, only 5 minutes left in our time. And the other question we have here too is what mental health resources are available for staff, and I would imagine also for inmates would be.
Yes, so persons in our care have access to most medium or maximum facilities have a psych services unit with on staff psychiatrists, psychologists, also social workers provide counseling. So there's lots of different groups available for them. I conduct a trauma healing group from a religious perspective. There are other resources for them. Also for staff, there are peer supporters. I'm a peer supporter. And we also have a third-party agency that provides counseling services and a number of different services available for staff to use as needed. We also have oftentimes, like if there's a crisis or something happens that we need mental health professionals to come in, we have some outside mental health providers come in and they're available to staff on an individual basis, and they can deal with whatever type of crisis or situation has happened at the facility directly, or something that is happening in their personal life. So there are different mental health resources. It's definitely promoted. There's training on crisis intervention, and suicide prevention is done every year. A very comprehensive program and training on that because it is an issue with staff. So there are some things in place, but
yeah, Lori, could you mention the peer support program?
Sure. So the peer support program, we have it with persons in our care throughout the state, all the different facilities where they're trained in mental health practices to be able to provide from a layperson's level, and also they're trained in how to recognize when professional services are needed. So it really affects, there's been such an incredible impact among the population on every level with being able to have a peer that they can talk to and open up with and trust, and there's confidentiality and those sort of things, because prison doesn't have a lot of those spaces or relationships. Everyone's kind of looking out for themselves. So it's important to have that, and it makes a difference. And the same with staff. Again, there's a certification for peer supporters. We have them in the community as well, and they provide support services where staff can talk to them, and if they need assistance with things that need to be done as far as advocating for more professional level services, or maybe they've encountered some sort of issue that is affecting their performance in their job, they have the support and assistance to be able to work through it as comfortable for them. And if it's something that is needed to be reported, then there are options for that, like mandatory reporting type things, where the person can, is told by the peer supporter that they need to report that, or the peer supporter is obligated to, or maybe they can work out a plan to do it together, those sort of things. So the peer support system has really impacted the quality of just relationship and environment, climate in a great way.
Great, terrific. Okay, are we about finished, I think, here?
We did have one question early on that's probably for the chaplain, was about accommodations for like indigenous peoples and also like the right of the sick, or often known as, or often called last rites, and how do you accommodate such things like that?
Right. So if we receive a request, depending upon what tradition it's with, like I believe is, let's give as an example, Catholics with the last rites, we would have to have a priest available to do that, or someone who's qualified to provide that service. So we would have to, again, have a connection with the community to have them come in and do that. And where that is possible, we certainly do. And where we have a Catholic chaplain, then the chaplain could provide that service in that situation. Also with Native American services, currently I think someone had asked about Ellsworth specifically, and because I'm there part-time, I can address that specifically, that there is smudging for Native Americans there. We do not have a sweat lodge. Most centers do not. And if we don't currently have a Native American volunteer to come in, and if we are able to secure a volunteer, then we would be able to potentially provide sweat lodge or whatever services the Native American community wants at Ellsworth or any other facility.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I think we're just about ready to finish. And I offered to offer a very small reflection. So if you will all join me, let us vow together to reach to our own deepest personal religious source and allow that source to help us see other people wherever they are as people, as our own friends in the human family. Because if faith means anything, it means we are all human and we're all family. Thank you very much. All right, I think we're finished for the